When a woman is publicly replaced by her mafia husband's mistress on live television, she discovers she's not an anonymous victim, but the ex-wife of Europe's most dangerous gang leader. And now, that man has returned to settle old scores. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and a woman learning to burn the world down to reclaim herself. Watch until the end, hit like, and comment with the city you're watching from so I know how far this story has come. Rain didn't just fall on Manhattan that night, it attacked. Sheets of water hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like they were trying to break through, to flood the pristine marble floors, to drown everything inside. Vivienne Cross stood in the center of the living room, barefoot on cold stone, still wearing the silk robe she'd thrown on after her shower. Her dark hair hung damp against her shoulders. In her hand, a champagne flute, expensive crystal, the kind Roman insisted they keep for important moments. She wasn't celebrating anything. She was just standing there, alone. Again. The television glowed across the room, muted, some news channel she'd left on without thinking. She barely looked at it anymore. Most nights it was just background noise to fill the silence. Roman had been gone for 6 days this time. No calls, no texts, just the usual message relayed through Vincent, his second in command. Business. He'll be back when he's back. 7 years. 7 years of this. Vivienne raised the glass to her lips, but stopped halfway. Something on the screen caught her eye. A flicker of movement, a familiar silhouette. She turned her head slowly, and the champagne flute slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble. The sound was sharp, violent, final. Because there he was, Roman Moretti, her husband, standing beneath a cascade of camera flashes at what looked like some high society charity gala. He wore a black tuxedo, perfectly tailored the way he always wore them. His dark hair slicked back, that sharp jawline she used to trace with her fingers when things were different, when things were real. But it wasn't Roman that made her chest tighten until she couldn't breathe. It was the woman beside him, tall, elegant, draped in a shimmering gold gown that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Diamonds dripped from her throat and wrists like liquid light. She had bronze skin, high cheekbones, and a smile that looked like it had been painted on by someone who understood power. The woman's hand rested on Roman's arm, not tentatively, not like a guest, like she belonged there. Vivienne's pulse hammered in her ears as she fumbled for the remote, unmuting the television with shaking hands. Here tonight at the Manhattan Children's Foundation Gala, the news anchor was saying, her voice bright and polished. And of course, we have to mention one of the evening's most generous donors, Roman Moretti, and his wife, Serafina Moretti. The words hit like a fist to the throat. His wife, Serafina Moretti. Vivienne stood frozen, the remote still clutched in her hand as the camera zoomed in on the couple. Roman leaned in to whisper something to the woman, Serafina, and she laughed, the kind of laugh that looked natural, intimate, the kind of laugh Vivienne hadn't managed in years. The screen cut back to the anchor. The Morettis have been making headlines recently for their philanthropic efforts across New York, and sources say they're planning an even bigger initiative in the coming months. But Vivienne's knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of the couch, breathing hard, her mind racing so fast she couldn't hold on to a single thought. His wife. Not his date, not his companion. His wife. Her name, Vivienne Cross, had just been erased. Publicly. Completely. Replaced by someone else. Someone who smiled for the cameras like she'd been doing it her whole life. And Roman stood there beside her like Vivienne had never existed at all. The penthouse suddenly felt smaller. The walls pressed in. The rain against the windows sounded like fists pounding, demanding to be let in. Vivienne stumbled backward, her bare feet crunching over the shattered glass. She didn't feel the cuts, didn't feel anything except the cold, creeping realization spreading through her chest. Roman wasn't cheating on her, he was replacing her, and he'd been doing it for God knew how long. Vivienne grabbed her phone off the kitchen counter, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She pulled up Roman's contact, just his first name, no photo, nothing sentimental, and hit call. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Her breath came faster now, shallow and ragged. She scrolled through her recent calls. The last time Roman had actually answered her was 9 days ago. Before that, 2 weeks. And before that, she stopped scrolling. It didn't matter. The pattern was clear. He'd been pulling away for months, maybe longer. And she'd told herself it was just business, that he was busy, that this was normal for a man like Roman Moretti, a man who ran an empire most people didn't even know existed. But this wasn't distance. This was erasure. Vivienne set the phone down carefully, like it might explode if she moved too fast. She walked back to the television, staring at the screen even though the segment had moved on to some politician's scandal. Her reflection stared back at her in the black glass, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's rent, but made her feel like a ghost. For 7 years, she had lived in Roman's world. She'd learned to be quiet when he needed silence. She'd learned to smile at his associates even when they looked at her like she was furniture. She'd learned to stop asking questions, stop demanding answers, stop being herself because that's what it took to survive beside a man like him. And now, she wasn't even surviving. She was already gone. Something shifted inside her chest then. Something cold and sharp and unfamiliar. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger. Not yet. It was clarity. Because Vivienne Cross hadn't always been Roman's silent, obedient wife. Once, years ago, in a life she'd buried so deep she sometimes forgot it was real, she'd been someone else entirely. She'd been Vivienne Vale, wife of Dorian Vale, the Ghost King. The name alone could still make her hands shake. Not from fear, from memory. From the weight of everything that name carried, the power, the violence, the suffocating love Dorian had wrapped around her like chains until she couldn't breathe anymore. She'd escaped him, barely. Ran halfway across the world, buried her identity, started over as someone new. Someone small, someone forgettable. And then she'd met Roman Moretti. At the time, she'd thought he was different, safer. He was powerful, yes, but controlled, calculated. He didn't love her the way Dorian had, with terrifying, all-consuming intensity. Roman was cooler, distant, and back then, distance had felt like freedom. She'd been so goddamn stupid. Vivienne turned away from the television and walked through the penthouse, her feet leaving small, bloody prints on the marble. She didn't bother turning on lights. She knew this place by heart, every corner, every shadow, every expensive piece of furniture Roman had chosen without asking her opinion. She ended up in his office. It was locked, of course. It always was. But Vivienne had stopped respecting locked doors a long time ago. She pulled a hairpin from the bathroom drawer, crouched in front of the office door, and worked the lock until it clicked. Inside, everything was exactly as Roman had left it. Mahogany desk, leather chair, shelves lined with books he never read, just kept for show. And in the corner, behind a painting of some Italian landscape, the wall safe. Vivienne's heart pounded as she moved the painting aside. The safe was digital 8-digit code. She tried Roman's birthday first. Nothing. Their anniversary. Nothing. His mother's birthday. Nothing. Then she tried the date they'd first met. The safe beeped and swung open. Vivienne's hands trembled as she pulled out the contents. Cash. Lots of it. Passports. Multiple. All with Roman's photo but different names. A handgun she'd never seen before. And beneath it all, a thick manila folder. She pulled it out and flipped it open. The first page was a property deed, a penthouse in Tribeca. Purchased 8 months ago under an LLC she didn't recognize. She flipped to the next page. Bank statements, transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through accounts she'd never heard of. Then she found the photos, Roman and Serafina at a restaurant, laughing. Roman and Serafina stepping out of a car, his hand on her back. Roman and Serafina at another gala, this one dated 6 months ago. And another. And another. 12 photos in total, spanning over a year. Vivienne's hands started shaking so badly she had to set the folder down on the desk. She pressed her palms flat against the wood, breathing hard, trying to hold herself together. But it was the last document that broke her. A single sheet of paper, typed, professional. The header read, Transition Strategy. Below it, a timeline, bullet points, clinical, methodical. Phase 1. Establish Serafina Moretti as primary public figure. Duration, 12 months. Status, complete. Phase 2. Gradual reduction of Vivienne Cross's public presence. Duration, 6 months. Status, in progress. Phase 3, legal separation. Asset redistribution. Media narrative control. Duration, 3 to 6 months. Status, pending. There was more. Pages of it. Every detail mapped out like she was a business problem to be solved. How to spin the divorce to protect Roman's reputation. How to keep her quiet. How to make sure she walked away with just enough money that she wouldn't fight back. How to erase her without leaving a trace. Vivienne's vision blurred. She wasn't crying, she was beyond that. This was something else. Something that felt like her entire body was shutting down, piece by piece. Roman had planned this. Not for weeks. Not for months. For over a year. And she'd been so busy trying to be the perfect wife, so busy not asking questions, that she'd let him do it. She'd let him erase her. No. No. Vivienne grabbed the folder, stuffed it back into the safe, and slammed it shut. She left the office, walked back into the living room, and grabbed her phone again. Her hands were steady now. She scrolled through her contacts, past all the names and numbers Roman had approved of, past the friends she'd lost touch with, past the life she'd built and destroyed and rebuilt so many times she couldn't remember what was real anymore. And then she found it. A number she'd saved years ago, buried under a fake name, with a note to herself, "Never use this. Ever." Vivienne stared at it for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the screen. If she did this, there was no going back. She knew that. She knew him. Dorian Vale didn't do anything halfway. If she reached out, if she opened that door again, everything would change. Everything would burn. But as she stood there in the dark, in the penthouse that had become her prison, staring at the television screen where her name had been replaced by someone else's, Vivienne realized she didn't care anymore. She hit send. The message was short. 3 words. "I need you." She didn't expect a response, not immediately. Dorian was careful. He'd make her wait, make her wonder. That's how he worked. But the reply came in less than 10 seconds. Finally. The next morning, Vivienne woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. She grabbed it, half asleep, and saw a text from an unknown number. Address attached. Tonight, 9 p.m. Come alone. Below it, a location pin for a building in Midtown. She recognized the address. It was one of the most exclusive private towers in Manhattan, the kind of place where billionaires and criminals lived side by side, and nobody asked questions. Vivienne sat up slowly, her head pounding. She hadn't slept well. Nightmares, half-formed and violent, had chased her through the dark. She couldn't remember the details, just the feeling of drowning, of being buried alive, of clawing her way towards something she couldn't see. She got out of bed and walked to the bathroom. Her feet stung where the glass had cut them last night, but the wounds were shallow. She'd cleaned them before bed, wrapped them in gauze. They'd heal. Everything else? She wasn't so sure. Vivienne stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair tangled, skin too pale. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Something sharp and awake that hadn't been there before. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. Vivienne showered, dressed in black jeans and a sweater, and pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail. She didn't bother with makeup, didn't bother trying to look like the version of herself Roman preferred. Polished, elegant, silent. That woman was dead. At 8:30 that night, Vivienne left the penthouse. She didn't leave a note, didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just walked out, took the elevator down to the parking garage, and climbed into her car. The drive to Midtown took 20 minutes. She spent the entire time gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white, trying not to think about what she was doing, trying not to remember the last time she'd seen Dorian Vale. It had been in Prague, 7 years ago. She'd left him in the middle of the night, taken nothing but the clothes on her back and a fake passport. She'd run because staying would have killed her, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. Dorian's love was suffocating, obsessive. It burned so hot it left nothing behind but ash. But Roman's love, or whatever he'd called it, had been worse, because at least Dorian had loved her. Roman had just owned her. Vivienne parked in the tower's underground garage and took the elevator up to the 42nd floor. The hallway was empty, silent, lined with doors that probably cost more than most houses. She found the one she was looking for and knocked once. The door opened immediately. And there he was. Dorian Vale looked exactly the same. Tall, broad-shouldered, with pale skin and ice-blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. His dark hair was shorter than she remembered, swept back from his face. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and dark slacks. No shoes. Casual, but somehow still dangerous. He didn't smile. Didn't say anything, just stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. Vivienne walked past him into the penthouse, and the door clicked shut behind her. The space was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, glittering like a field of stars. The furniture was minimal, sleek leather couches, a glass coffee table, abstract art on the walls. Everything about it screamed money and control. "Drink?" Dorian's voice was calm, almost bored. Vivienne turned to face him. "I'm not here for small talk." "No," he agreed. He walked past her to the bar in the corner, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and took a slow sip. "You're here because someone hurt you, and you want me to fix it." "I want you to help me," Vivienne corrected. Dorian raised an eyebrow. "Same thing." "No, it's not." He studied her for a long moment, those pale eyes unreadable. Then he set his glass down and crossed his arms. "Tell me." So she did. Vivienne told him everything. About Roman's absences, about the gala, about the woman, Serafina, who'd been introduced as Mrs. Moretti, about the files she'd found in the safe, the timeline, the plan to erase her like she was nothing more than an inconvenient detail. Dorian didn't interrupt, didn't react. He just listened, his expression carved from stone. When she finished, the silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Finally, Dorian spoke. "Roman Moretti is a parasite." Vivienne blinked. "What?" "He's a parasite," Dorian repeated, his voice flat. "He saw something he wanted, you, and he took it. Not because he loved you, not even because he desired you, because taking you from me made him feel powerful, made him feel like he'd won something." Vivienne's chest tightened. "That's not—" "It is," Dorian said simply. "You know it is. Otherwise you wouldn't be here." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the words stuck in her throat because deep down she knew he was right. Roman had never looked at her the way Dorian had, never burned for her, never fought for her. He'd just taken her, claimed her, like a trophy. "I didn't come here for revenge," Vivienne said quietly. Dorian smiled then. It wasn't a kind smile. "Yes, you did. You just don't want to admit it yet." He moved closer, and Vivienne forced herself not to step back. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, the faint trace of cologne. "I'll help you," Dorian said. "But you need to be very clear about what you're asking for, because once I start, I don't stop halfway. If you want Roman Moretti destroyed, I'll destroy him, but it won't be clean, and it won't be quiet." Vivienne's heart pounded. "I just want him to pay for what he did. Then he'll pay." Dorian's smile widened, starting with the Black Orchid Gala. Vivienne frowned. "What's that?" "The most exclusive event in New York. Politicians, billionaires, criminals who've bought enough legitimacy to pretend they're not. It happens in 2 weeks, and your ex-husband, will be there with his new wife." The words hit like a slap. Vivienne's jaw tightened. "How do you know that?" "Because I was invited," Dorian said. "And because Roman Moretti has been using that event to solidify his position in New York for the past 3 years. This year, he's planning to introduce Serafina as his queen, officially, publicly, in front of everyone who matters." Vivienne's stomach twisted. "He's going to humiliate me in front of the entire city." "He already has," Dorian said bluntly. "The question is whether you're going to let him get away with it." Vivienne stared at him, her mind racing. She could walk away. Right now. Leave this penthouse, go back to her life, whatever was left of it, and disappear the way she'd planned. Take the money from the divorce, start over somewhere far away, and never look back. But as she stood there, looking into Dorian's cold blue eyes, she realized something. She didn't want to disappear. She wanted Roman to burn. "What do you need from me?" Vivienne asked. Dorian's smile turned sharp. "Just say yes." "To what?" to being my date for the Black Orchid Gala. He stepped closer, and this time Vivienne did step back. We walk in together, in front of every camera, every reporter, every criminal and politician in New York, and we remind your husband exactly who you were before you ever met him. Vivienne's pulse hammered in her ears. That's insane. That's the point. She stopped, trying to find the words. He'll lose his mind. Good, Dorian said coldly. Let him. Vivienne opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because the truth was, the idea didn't terrify her. It thrilled her. The thought of walking into that gala on Dorian Vale's arm, of watching Roman's face when he saw her, of making him feel even a fraction of the humiliation he'd put her through, it felt like breathing for the first time in years. Okay, Vivienne whispered. Dorian's expression didn't change. You're sure? Yes? Because once we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? Vivienne met his eyes. I don't want to go back. For a long moment, Dorian just looked at her. Then he nodded slowly. All right then. We have 2 weeks. I'll have my people send over everything you need. Dress, jewelry, security details. All you have to do is show up. And after? Vivienne asked. After the gala, what happens? Dorian picked up his whiskey glass and finished it in one swallow. After, we remind Roman Moretti what happens when you make an enemy of the Ghost King. He set the glass down and walked toward the door, pulling it open. The conversation was over. Vivienne walked past him into the hallway, her mind spinning, her chest tight. She made it 3 steps before Dorian's voice stopped her. Vivienne, she turned. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the glow of the penthouse, his expression unreadable. You were always too good for him, Dorian said quietly. I tried to tell you that 7 years ago, but you wouldn't listen. Vivienne's throat tightened. I know. Do you? Dorian tilted his head. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to make the same mistake twice. What's that supposed to mean? It means men like Roman, men like me. We don't let go of things we want, not easily. And you walking into that gala on my arm? That's a declaration of war. So before you do this, you need to ask yourself one question. What question? Dorian's pale eyes locked onto hers. Are you ready to watch the world burn? The door closed before Vivienne could answer. She stood alone in the hallway, her heart pounding, her hands shaking, the weight of what she'd just agreed to settling over her like a storm cloud. And deep down, beneath the fear and the doubt and the exhaustion, a single thought burned through her mind like wildfire. Yes. Yes, she was ready. Because Roman Moretti had spent 7 years turning her into a ghost. And now, she was going to haunt him. The 2 weeks that followed felt like living inside a countdown clock. Every morning, Vivienne woke up in the penthouse, Roman's penthouse, though he still hadn't come back, and felt the seconds ticking away in her chest. 14 days, then 13, then 12. Each one bringing her closer to something she couldn't take back. Roman finally called on day 3. Vivienne was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't touched, when her phone lit up with his name. She let it ring twice before answering. Where the hell have you been? His voice came through sharp, impatient, not worried, just annoyed. Vivienne gripped the phone tighter. I could ask you the same thing. I'm working, you know that. Do I? There was a pause. She could hear background noise, voices, the clink of glasses. He was at a restaurant, or a bar. Somewhere public, somewhere he felt safe. What's that supposed to mean? Roman asked. Vivienne almost laughed, almost told him everything right then, that she knew about Serafina, about the penthouse in Tribeca, about the goddamn transition strategy sitting in his safe. But she stopped herself. Because if she said it now, over the phone, she'd lose the only advantage she had, surprise. Nothing, Vivienne said flatly. When are you coming home? Few more days. I've got meetings lined up through Friday. Fine. Another pause. Longer this time. Roman wasn't stupid. He could hear the shift in her voice, the flatness where warmth used to be. But he didn't push. Maybe he didn't care enough to push. You okay? He asked, and it sounded like an afterthought. I'm perfect, Vivienne said. Have fun at your meetings. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. She set the phone down on the counter and pressed her palms flat against the cold marble, breathing hard. She'd just lied to her husband's face, or his voice anyway, and it had felt easy, natural, like she'd been practicing for this moment her whole life. Maybe she had been. That afternoon, a package arrived, no return address, just a black box tied with a silver ribbon. Vivienne carried it into the bedroom and set it on the bed, staring at it like it might explode. Inside was a dress. Not just any dress. The kind of dress that looked like it had been pulled from a nightmare or a dream, depending on who was wearing it. Midnight black silk that shimmered when the light hit it, cut low in the front and lower in the back. It was the kind of thing that demanded attention, that made a statement before you even opened your mouth. Beneath the dress was a note handwritten in sharp, precise strokes. Wear this. Nothing else. No signature. Didn't need one. Vivienne ran her fingers over the fabric and something cold settled in her stomach. This was real. This was happening. In 11 days, she was going to walk into the most exclusive event in New York on Dorian Vale's arm, wearing a dress designed to make her impossible to ignore. And Roman was going to see her. She folded the dress carefully, put it back in the box, and shoved it into the back of her closet. Then she poured herself a drink and tried not to think about what came next. Day 7. Vivienne started digging. She couldn't just show up at the gala and hope everything worked out. She needed information, ammunition, something she could use when, everything went to hell. She started with Serafina. It took less than an hour to find her online. Serafina Conte. That was her real name, before she'd become Serafina Moretti. 32 years old, former model, no criminal record, no scandals. Just a string of high-profile relationships with powerful men, each one richer and more dangerous than the last. She'd been with Roman for at least 18 months, based on the earliest photo Vivienne could find. A charity auction in the Hamptons. Serafina in a white dress, Roman's hand on her waist, both of them smiling like they owned the world. Vivienne's stomach twisted. 18 months. That meant Roman had started seeing Serafina while he was still married. While Vivienne was still living in the penthouse, still playing the role of dutiful wife, still believing the lies he fed her about late nights and business trips. She scrolled deeper, clicking through photos, articles, society page mentions. Serafina wasn't just Roman's mistress. She was his replacement, younger, more polished, more willing to play the game. Everything Vivienne had stopped being. The worst part? Serafina looked happy. In every photo she glowed, like being with Roman was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Vivienne slammed her laptop shut and walked away before she put her fist through the screen. Button. Punch. Day 9. Roman came home. Vivienne heard the front door open around midnight. She was in bed, pretending to sleep, when she heard his footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, tired. He didn't come into the bedroom, just dropped his bag in the office and headed for the shower. When he finally climbed into bed beside her, he didn't touch her, didn't say a word, just lay there on his side of the mattress, the space between them feeling like a canyon. Vivienne kept her breathing steady, her eyes closed, and wondered how long they'd been sleeping like strangers. The next morning, Roman was gone before she woke up. No note, no text, just an empty side of the bed and the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air. Vivienne got up, walked into his office, and checked the safe again. The transition strategy document was gone. Her heart stopped. She checked again, pulling everything out, searching every corner. But it wasn't there. He'd moved it. Or destroyed it. Or... Looking for something? Vivienne spun around. Roman stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. He was dressed for work, tailored suit, crisp white shirt, hair perfect. He looked calm, controlled. But his eyes were cold. "I asked you a question," Roman said. Vivienne straightened slowly, forcing herself not to panic. "I was looking for the checkbook. In my safe? I couldn't find it anywhere else." Roman studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. The click of the lock made Vivienne's skin crawl. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" Roman asked. "Nothing's going on." "Bullshit." He moved closer and Vivienne forced herself to hold her ground. You've been acting strange all week, distant, and now I find you going through my safe? I told you. You're lying. The words hung between them, sharp and final. Vivienne's pulse hammered in her ears, but she kept her face blank. She'd learned that from him, how to lie without flinching. Think whatever you want, she said. Roman's jaw tightened. For a second, she thought he might grab her, might push her against the wall and demand the truth. But he didn't. He just stood there staring at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. I don't have time for this, he said finally. I've got a meeting in an hour. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Vivienne waited until she heard the front door close. Then she collapsed against the desk, breathing hard, her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the edge to keep herself upright. He knew, maybe not everything, but he knew something was wrong. And if he started digging, if he started asking the right questions. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text to Dorian. We need to move faster. The reply came instantly. Patience. 5 more days. Vivienne wanted to scream. 5 days felt like an eternity. 5 days of pretending everything was fine while Roman circled her like a predator who'd caught the scent of blood. But she didn't have a choice. So she put the phone away, walked into the bathroom, and stared at herself in the mirror until her hands stopped shaking. Day 12. Dorian called. We need to meet, he said without preamble. Tonight, same place. Why? Because I have information you need to hear, and because we need to go over what happens at the gala. Vivienne glanced at the clock. It was almost 8. Roman was out, again. Some dinner meeting he'd mentioned that morning, though she hadn't been invited. I'll be there in an hour, she said. She hung up, changed into dark jeans and a black sweater, and left the penthouse without looking back. The drive to Dorian's tower felt longer this time. Traffic clogged the streets, and every red light made her want to scream. By the time she pulled into the underground garage, her nerves were shot. Dorian answered the door before she knocked. You look like hell, he said. Thanks. He stepped aside and she walked in. The penthouse looked the same as before, cold, minimal, expensive. Dorian closed the door and gestured toward the couch. Sit. Vivienne sat. Dorian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one, and settled into the chair across from her. He didn't drink, just held the glass, watching her. Roman knows something's wrong, Vivienne said. Of course he does. You're acting different. I'm trying not to. You're trying too hard. Dorian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Men like Roman, they're good at reading people. It's how they survive. And right now you're broadcasting guilt like a fucking beacon. Vivienne's grip tightened on the glass. What am I supposed to do? Stop caring. Dorian's voice was flat. Stop worrying about what he thinks. Stop trying to keep him calm. You're not his wife anymore. You're his enemy. Start acting like it. The words hit harder than they should have. Because he was right. She was still trying to manage Roman, still trying to keep the peace, still playing the role she'd been trapped in for 7 years. I don't know how to do that, Vivienne admitted quietly. Dorian's expression softened, barely. Yes, you do. You did it once before. That was different. Was it? He set his glass down. You walked away from me. From everything I built. You disappeared in the middle of the night and stayed gone for 7 years. If you can do that, you can handle Roman Moretti. Vivienne looked away. I left you because I had to. Because staying would have killed me. And staying with Roman won't? She didn't have an answer for that. Dorian stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. I had my people dig into Roman's operation. Financials, associates, properties, everything. And he's weaker than he looks. Dorian turned to face her. Most of his power comes from alliances. Old mob families, corrupt politicians, offshore investors. But those alliances are fragile, built on reputation, on fear. If that reputation cracks, the whole thing collapses. What does that have to do with the gala? Everything. Dorian moved closer, his pale eyes locked on hers. The Black Orchid Gala isn't just a party, it's a show of power. Every criminal, every politician, every billionaire in New York will be there, watching. And when you walk in on my arm, you're not just humiliating Roman. You're proving he's weak, That he couldn't even keep his own wife. Vivienne's stomach twisted. So I'm bait. No, you're a weapon. Dorian crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Roman built his empire on control, on making people believe he's untouchable. But the second they see him lose control, the second they see him rattled, they'll start circling, and once that starts, it doesn't stop. You want to destroy him. I want to remind him what happens when you take something that belongs to me. Vivienne flinched. I don't belong to you. I know. Dorian's voice was quieter now, almost gentle. But he doesn't. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was insane, that she wasn't a weapon or a prize or anything else. But the truth was, she'd already made her choice. The moment she sent that text, the moment she agreed to walk into that gala, she'd crossed a line. There was no going back now. What happens after? Vivienne asked. After the gala. After Roman's empire falls apart. What happens to me? Dorian stood, his expression unreadable. That's up to you. Not an answer. It's the only one I have. He walked back to the bar, refilled his glass, and downed it in one swallow. Vivienne watched him, trying to read the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. He looked the same as he always had, controlled, dangerous, impossible to predict. But there was something else there now, something raw. You still love me, Vivienne said. It wasn't a question. Dorian didn't turn around. Does it matter? I don't know. Then don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answer to. Vivienne stood, setting her untouched glass on the table. I should go. Wait. She stopped. Dorian turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd walked into his penthouse 2 weeks ago, he looked uncertain, vulnerable, human. I need you to understand something, he said. When we walk into that gala, everything changes. Not just for Roman, for you, for me, for everyone watching. Once we do this, there's no neutral ground, no safe place to hide. You'll have enemies you didn't know existed. I know. Do you? Dorian crossed the room until he was standing inches away. Because the woman I knew 7 years ago ran the first time things got dangerous. And I need to know you're not going to run again. Vivienne met his eyes. I'm not running. Promise me. I just did. Dorian searched her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. Then we do this. He walked to the door and opened it. Vivienne stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Vivienne? She turned. Dorian stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. Wear the dress, he said, and don't bring a weapon. I'll have enough for both of us. The door closed. Vivienne stood alone in the hallway, trying to steady her breathing, trying to convince herself this was the right choice. But deep down, she knew the truth. Right or wrong didn't matter anymore. She was already in too deep to turn back. Day 14. The day of the gala. Vivienne woke up at 6 in the morning, her stomach twisted in knots. Roman was already gone. He'd left sometime during the night, probably to finalize preparations with Serafina. She hadn't asked, hadn't cared. She spent the morning in a daze, moving through the penthouse like a ghost. She showered, made coffee she didn't drink, stared at the black dress hanging in her closet like it was a death sentence. At 4 in the afternoon, a team arrived. Hair, makeup, nails. They didn't ask questions, just worked in efficient silence, transforming her piece by piece. Vivienne sat in the chair and let them, her mind somewhere far away. By 7, she was ready. The woman staring back at her in the mirror didn't look like Vivienne Cross. She didn't even look like Vivienne Vale. She looked like someone else entirely, someone dangerous, someone untouchable, someone who could walk into a room full of predators and make them all look twice. The dress fit perfectly. The silk clung to every curve, shimmering like liquid shadow. Her hair had been cut shorter, falling just below her jawline in sharp, angular lines. Her makeup was dark, smoky eyes, deep red lips, and the diamonds around her throat and wrists caught the light like frozen fire. She looked like a weapon. At 8:30, her phone buzzed. Downstairs. 5 minutes. Vivienne grabbed a small black clutch, just her phone, ID, and lipstick, and walked out of the penthouse for what she knew might be the last time. The elevator ride down felt endless. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished metal doors, and for a second she didn't recognize herself. Then the doors opened. Dorian stood in the lobby, hands in his pockets, wearing a black tuxedo that looked like it had been tailored specifically to make every other man in the world look inadequate. His pale eyes swept over her once, cold and assessing. "Good," he said simply. Vivienne stepped out of the elevator. "That's it? Good? What do you want me to say? You look beautiful?" Dorian's expression didn't change. "You know you do. That's the point." He turned and walked toward the entrance, and Vivienne followed. Outside, a black SUV waited. Dorian opened the door for her, and she climbed in. The interior was dark, leather seats, tinted windows. 2 men sat in the front, security, probably, but they didn't turn around. Dorian slid in beside her, and the door closed. The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "You nervous?" Dorian asked finally. "No." "Liar." Vivienne glanced at him. "Are you?" "No." He looked out the window. "I've been planning this for 7 years." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vivienne's chest tightened. "Planning what?" "Getting you back." She stared at him, her pulse hammering. "I'm not." "I know." Dorian turned to look at her, and his expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. "You're not mine. You're not his. You're nobody's. I understand that. But tonight, for a few hours, you let the world think you're mine. And in return, I burn Roman Moretti's empire to the ground. That's the deal." Vivienne's throat felt tight. "And after?" "After you decide." "Decide what?" Dorian leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something just above a whisper. "Whether you want to disappear again, or whether you're finally ready to stop running." Before Vivienne could respond, the SUV slowed. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. They'd arrived. The Black Orchid Gala was being held at one of Manhattan's oldest ballrooms, a massive stone building that looked like it had been transplanted from Victorian England. Red carpet stretched from the street to the entrance, lined with cameras, reporters, and security. Hundreds of people crowded the barriers, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was important enough to be invited. Vivienne's hands started shaking. "Breathe," Dorian said. "And remember, you're not here to hide. You're here to be seen." The SUV stopped. One of the men in front stepped out, opened Dorian's door. Dorian climbed out first, buttoning his jacket, and then turned back to offer Vivienne his hand. She stared at it for a long moment. This was it. The moment she couldn't take back. Once she stepped out of this car, once the cameras saw her, once Roman saw her, everything would burn. Vivienne took Dorian's hand and stepped into the light. The cameras exploded, flashes erupted from every direction, blinding and violent. Voices shouted questions she couldn't hear over the roar in her ears. Dorian's hand tightened on hers, steady and unyielding, as he led her down the red carpet. Vivienne kept her chin up, her expression blank, her steps measured. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just walked beside Dorian Vale like she'd been doing it her entire life. And the crowd noticed. Whispers rippled through the barriers. Reporters leaned in, shouting questions. Security stepped forward, trying to control the chaos. Because everyone recognized Dorian, and everyone knew what it meant when a woman appeared on his arm. They reached the entrance. Dorian handed their invitations to the attendant, who glanced at them once and went pale. He stepped aside immediately, and they walked into the ballroom. The space was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from a vaulted ceiling. Gold accents lined the walls. A full orchestra played in the corner. And everywhere, people in expensive clothes stood in clusters, drinking champagne and trading secrets. Vivienne scanned the crowd, her heart pounding, searching for... There. Roman stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a group of men in suits. He was laughing at something one of them said, his hand resting casually on the back of a chair. And beside him, draped in gold silk and diamonds, was Serafina. She looked even more stunning in person. Bronze skin, perfect smile, one hand on Roman's arm like she belonged there. Vivienne's vision narrowed. Dorian leaned in close. "Ready?" Vivienne didn't answer. She just started walking. The crowd parted as they moved deeper into the ballroom. Conversation stuttered and died. Heads turned, eyes widened. Because Dorian Vale didn't attend events like this. He didn't show his face in public. And the fact that he was here, now, with a woman on his arm. It was a message. They were 20 feet from Roman when he finally saw them. His head turned, his eyes locked on Vivienne, and the color drained from his face so fast she thought he might collapse. The men around him noticed, stopped talking, turned to see what he was staring at. Serafina followed Roman's gaze. Her smile faltered. Vivienne stopped directly in front of them. Dorian stood beside her, calm and expressionless, his hand still resting lightly on her lower back. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Roman found his voice. "What the fuck is this?" Vivienne smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Roman." His jaw tightened. He looked at Dorian, then back at Vivienne, his expression shifting between shock and rage. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited." "Bullshit!" Dorian finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost bored. "She's my guest." "Problem?" Roman's hands curled into fists. "You're goddamn right there's a problem. This is...
"What?" Dorian interrupted. "Your event? Your city? Your wife?" He paused, letting the words sink in. "Oh, wait. She's not your wife anymore, is she? I believe that's Serafina now." Every eye in the immediate vicinity turned toward them. Whispers erupted. Cameras, discreet ones carried by society photographers, turned in their direction. Serafina's smile had vanished completely. She looked at Roman, then at Vivienne, her confusion written across her face. "Roman, what's going on?" Roman didn't answer. He was still staring at Vivienne like she'd risen from the dead. "You want to explain?" Vivienne asked softly. "Or should I?" "Don't!" Roman warned. "Don't what?" "Tell her the truth." Vivienne took a step closer. "That you're still married? That the divorce you promised her hasn't been filed yet? That I only found out about her 2 weeks ago when I saw you on television?" Serafina went rigid. "What is she talking about?" Roman's mask finally cracked. "Vivienne, stop." "Or what?" Her voice was louder now, cutting through the music, through the murmur of the crowd. "You'll threaten me? You'll lie to me again? You've been doing that for 7 years, Roman. I think I'm done being quiet about it." More heads turned. More people stopped talking. The orchestra played on, oblivious, but the crowd around them had gone silent. Dorian leaned in, his voice a low murmur that only Roman could hear. "You should have been more careful about who you decided to replace." Roman's eyes snapped to him. "This is your doing." "No." Dorian's smile was razor sharp. "This is yours. You took something that didn't belong to you. Now I'm taking it back. She's not yours. She was my wife long before she was ever yours," Dorian said coldly. "Or did you forget that part?" The words dropped like a bomb. Shock rippled through the ballroom. Reporters pushed forward. Cameras flashed. The whispers turned into an audible roar. Because everyone knew Dorian Vale. Everyone knew his reputation. And everyone knew that no woman had ever left him and lived to talk about it. Except one. Serafina grabbed Roman's arm. "Roman, is this true?" Roman's face had gone from pale to flushed, his jaw working like he was chewing glass. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and said nothing. Because there was nothing he could say. Not here, not now, not in front of half of New York's elite, all of them watching him crumble in real time. Vivienne felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Not satisfaction, not quite. Something darker. Power. She turned to Dorian. "I think we're done here." Dorian nodded once. Then he looked at Roman, his expression empty. "See you around, Moretti." They turned and walked away, leaving Roman standing there with his new wife and his shattered reputation, the crowd closing in around him like vultures circling a corpse. Vivienne made it 10 steps before her legs started shaking, 20 before she realized she was holding her breath, 30 before Dorian's hand tightened on her back, steadying her. "Keep walking," he murmured. She did. They walked through the ballroom, through the entrance, back out onto the red carpet. The cameras were still there, still flashing, but Vivienne barely saw them. Her vision had narrowed to a tunnel, her heartbeat pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The SUV pulled up. Dorian opened the door, and Vivienne climbed in. He followed, the door closed, and the vehicle pulled away from the chaos behind them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Vivienne started laughing. It wasn't a happy sound.
It was jagged, broken, halfway to sobbing. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to stop, but she couldn't. The laughter just kept coming, spilling out of her like something she'd been holding in for years. Dorian watched her silently. Vivienne gasped for air. I just destroyed my husband in front of the entire city. Ex-husband, Dorian corrected. He doesn't know that yet. He does now. Vivienne's laughter died. She lowered her hands, staring at Dorian. What happens next? Dorian's expression didn't change. Now? Roman tries to fight back, and we finish what we started. How? By making sure he has nothing left to fight with. Vivienne's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, her hand still shaking. 15 missed calls. All from Roman. And a single text message. You're dead. Vivienne stared at the words, her chest tight, her pulse hammering. Dorian leaned over, read the message, and smiled. Good, he said. Let him come. Vivienne looked at him, at the coldness in his eyes, at the certainty in his voice, and realized she'd just stepped past the point of no return. The SUV hadn't even made it 10 blocks before Vivienne's phone started ringing again. She stared at Roman's name flashing across the screen, her thumb hovering over the decline button. The phone buzzed in her palm like something alive, insistent, demanding. Dorian glanced at it. Answer it. What? Answer the call. His voice was flat. Let him hear your voice. Let him know you're not afraid. Vivienne's pulse hammered. She swiped to accept and lifted the phone to her ear. Vivienne. Roman's voice came through rough, barely controlled. She could hear background noise, music, voices, the chaos of the gala still unfolding. Where the fuck are you? Does it matter? You just humiliated me in front of every person who matters in this city. Good. The word came out cold. Now you know how it feels. Roman's breathing was audible now, harsh and ragged. You think you're clever? Walking in there with him? You think that makes you powerful? I think it makes me done with you. You're not done with anything. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You're still my wife. You live in my penthouse. You breathe because I allow it, and you just declared war on the wrong fucking man. Vivienne's grip tightened on the phone. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Roman. You should be. The line went dead. Vivienne lowered the phone slowly, her hands trembling. Dorian watched her with those pale, unreadable eyes. He's going to come after me, she said. Let him. You don't understand. Roman he doesn't stop. Once he decides someone's an enemy, I know exactly what he does. Dorian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And it doesn't matter, because by the time he figures out how to fight back, he won't have anything left to fight with. Vivienne wanted to believe him, wanted to feel safe, but all she felt was the cold certainty that she'd just kicked a hornet's nest and there was nowhere left to hide. The SUV turned down a narrow street and pulled up in front of a building Vivienne didn't recognize, smaller than Dorian's usual tower. Older. The kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside, but probably cost more than most people would make in a lifetime. Where are we? Vivienne asked. Safe house. Dorian opened his door. You're staying here tonight. Roman knows where you live. He doesn't know about this place. I'm not hiding. You're not hiding. You're regrouping. He stepped out, then turned back. Come on. Vivienne followed him into the building. The lobby was dark, empty except for a single elevator with a keypad. Dorian punched in a code, and the doors slid open. They rode up in silence, 14 floors, and stepped out into a hallway lined with unmarked doors. Dorian led her to the last one, unlocked it, and pushed it open. Inside was a loft. Clean lines, minimal furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It looked like every other place Dorian owned, expensive and soulless. There's food in the kitchen, Dorian said. Clothes in the bedroom. Security's downstairs if you need anything. Vivienne walked to the window, staring out at the glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, Roman was probably tearing apart the gala, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation, trying to figure out how to destroy her. What now? She asked without turning around. Now we wait. For what? For Roman to make a mistake. Dorian crossed the room, poured himself a drink from the bar. He's angry, humiliated. Men like him don't think clearly when their ego's been bruised. He'll do something stupid, and when he does, we'll be ready.
Vivienne turned to face him. You sound very sure of yourself. I am. Why?
Dorian took a slow sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I've been studying Roman Moretti for 7 years. I know how he thinks, how he operates, how he breaks. And trust me, he's about to break. The way he said it, calm, certain, almost clinical, made Vivienne's skin crawl. Because she'd seen that look before. That cold calculation. That absolute conviction that the world would bend to his will. It was the same look Dorian used to give her when they were married. I need to ask you something, Vivienne said. Go ahead. Why now? You've known where I was for 7 years. You could have come for me any time, so why wait until now? Dorian set his glass down. For a moment he didn't answer, just stood there, backlit by the city lights, his face half in shadow. Because you weren't ready, he said finally. Ready for what? To remember who you really are. He moved closer, and Vivienne forced herself not to step back. When you left me, you were terrified, desperate. You wanted safety, normalcy, a life that didn't require looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes. So you buried yourself, became someone small, someone forgettable, and I let you. Because I knew that version of you wouldn't survive, not long term. Eventually, something would crack. Someone would hurt you badly enough that you'd remember. Vivienne's chest tightened. Remember what? That you're not meant to be small. Dorian stopped inches away from her. You're Vivienne Vale. You married the most dangerous man in Europe and survived him. You don't get to pretend you're anything less than that. The words hit like a slap. Because he was right. She'd spent 7 years trying to be someone else, someone softer, quieter, easier, and it had cost her everything. I'm not going back to being your wife, Vivienne said. I know. Then what do you want from me? Dorian's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his face. I want you to stop running from me, from yourself, from the life you were always meant to live. Vivienne opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, expecting another call from Roman. It wasn't Roman. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. You need to see this. Below it, a link. Vivienne's stomach dropped. What is this? Dorian leaned over, read the message, and his jaw tightened. Open it. She clicked the link. It took her to a private video upload. No title, no description, just a timestamp from earlier tonight. Vivienne hit play. The video was grainy, shot from a distance, but she recognized the location immediately. The gala, the ballroom. The camera was focused on Roman and Serafina, standing near the center of the room, surrounded by reporters and guests. Roman was talking, his voice muffled but audible. The timestamp put it about 20 minutes after Vivienne and Dorian had left. Understand there's been some confusion tonight, Roman was saying, his tone smooth, controlled. The mask was back in place. But I want to set the record straight. My wife and I are very happy. The woman you saw earlier, Vivienne Cross, is someone I was briefly involved with years ago. She's been struggling with some personal issues, and unfortunately, she showed up tonight attempting to cause a scene. Vivienne's blood went cold. On the screen, Serafina stood beside Roman, nodding sympathetically. A reporter asked something Vivienne couldn't hear. Roman's smile didn't waver. I've already spoken with my legal team. We'll be pursuing a restraining order. I just hope she gets the help she needs. The video cut off. Vivienne stared at the blank screen, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. He's lying! He's telling everyone I'm crazy, Dorian finished. He's discrediting you, making sure that if you try to come forward with the truth, no one will believe you. But the marriage, the documents, mean nothing if he can convince people you're mentally unstable. Dorian's voice was hard. It's a smart play. Ruthless, but smart. He's cutting you off at the knees before you can do any real damage. Vivienne's vision blurred. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to think. But all she could see was Roman's face on that screen, calm and collected, spinning lies while the entire city watched. He's destroying me, she whispered. Not yet. Dorian grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. This doesn't change anything. We knew he'd fight back. This is just the opening move. The opening move? He just convinced half of New York that I'm insane, so we prove he's lying. How? Vivienne's voice cracked. How do we prove anything when he controls the narrative? Dorian's grip tightened. The same way we always do. We find leverage, something he can't spin, something that destroys him faster than he can destroy you. Vivienne pulled away, pacing the length of the loft. Her mind raced, trying to find an angle, a way out, but every path she could see ended the same way, with Roman standing over her wreckage, victorious. There has to be something, she said. Bank records, property deeds. Something that proves he was planning to divorce me. Something that proves Serafina isn't just a mistress. There is. Vivienne stopped, turned. What? Dorian walked to the bar, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through something. I told you my people dug into Roman's operation. We found more than just financial records. He turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a photograph. Roman and Serafina sitting at a table in what looked like a lawyer's office. Between them, a stack of documents. Vivienne zoomed in. The top page was partially visible, enough to read the header. Marriage license application. State of New York. The date was from 6 months ago. Vivienne's breath caught. He was going to marry her, while he was still married to me. Bigamy, Dorian said, which is a felony. And more importantly, it proves everything you've been saying, that he was replacing you, that Serafina wasn't just a mistress, that his whole story about you being unstable is bullshit. Vivienne stared at the photo, her heart pounding. This was it. This was the ammunition she needed. With this, she could destroy Roman's narrative before it even took root. We leak this, she said, tonight, before he can do any more damage. Dorian nodded. I'll make the calls. No. Vivienne looked up at him. I'll do it. I'm the one he tried to erase. I'm the one who gets to burn him. For a moment, Dorian just watched her. Then he handed her the phone. All right, there's a contact in there, Miranda Chen. She's a journalist, discreet but connected. Send her the photo and your statement. She'll run with it. Vivienne took the phone, her hand steadier now. She opened the message thread, attached the photo, and started typing. This is Vivienne Cross. Roman Moretti has been lying to the public about our marriage. Attached is proof that he attempted to obtain a marriage license for another woman while still legally married to me. I have additional documentation proving a pattern of fraud, manipulation, and bigamy. I'm prepared to go on record. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The message showed as delivered. Then, almost immediately, as read. Vivienne's phone buzzed 30 seconds later. Holy shit! Call me. Now. Vivienne dialed. The journalist picked up on the first ring. Vivienne Cross? Miranda's voice was sharp, efficient. Is this real? Every word. You understand what you're doing? Once I publish this, there's no taking it back. Roman Moretti will come after you with everything he has. I know. And you're willing to go on record? Full interview, photographs, documents? Vivienne glanced at Dorian. He nodded once. Yes, Vivienne said. I'll give you everything. Miranda exhaled. Okay, I can have a story ready by morning, but I need you somewhere safe. Can you do that? I'm already there. Good. I'll call you in 2 hours with follow-up questions. Don't leave wherever you are. Don't talk to anyone else. And for the love of God, don't answer if Roman calls. The line went dead. Vivienne lowered the phone, her whole body trembling. She'd just weaponized her own life, turned her marriage, her pain, into ammunition. And by morning, the entire world would know the truth, or at least her version of it. You did the right thing, Dorian said. Vivienne wasn't so sure, but it was done. There was no going back now. She walked to the window, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Roman was probably strategizing, calling in favors, preparing his next move. And by sunrise, when that article hit, he'd know exactly where she stood. On the other side of a war she'd started. I need a drink, Vivienne said. Dorian poured her one. She drank it standing at the window, watching the lights below blur and shift. Her phone stayed silent. No more calls from Roman, no more texts, just silence. It felt like the calm before a bomb went off. Cute. Vivienne didn't sleep that night. She tried, lay down in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar loft. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Roman's face, Serafina's smile, the crowd at the gala watching her like she was something broken. By 3 a.m, she gave up and went back to the living room. Dorian was still awake, sitting on the couch with his laptop, working on something she couldn't see. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked without looking up. "Something like that." He closed the laptop and set it aside. "Sit." Vivienne sat on the opposite end of the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. The silk robe she'd found in the bedroom felt too thin, too exposed. She wrapped her arms around herself. "You're having second thoughts," Dorian said. "No, maybe. I don't know." Vivienne pressed her forehead to her knees. "What if this makes everything worse? What if Roman finds a way to spin it? What if— Stop! Dorian's voice cut through her spiral. "You can't control how he responds. All you can control is whether you fight back or let him bury you. You chose to fight. Now you live with it." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one he's trying to destroy. No, I'm the one who's going to help you destroy him first." Vivienne looked up. "Why? Why what? Why are you helping me? You keep saying it's because I was yours first, because Roman took something that belonged to you. But that's not a reason. That's an excuse. So why are you really doing this?" Dorian was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Because when you left, you took something with you." "What?" "The only part of me that wasn't a monster." The words hung in the air between them, raw and unguarded. Vivienne's chest tightened. "Dorian, don't." He stood abruptly, crossing to the window. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I need you to understand that when you disappeared, I spent 3 years trying to find you. And when I finally did, when I saw you with him, living that small, quiet life, I realized something." "What?" "That maybe you were better off without me." He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost human. "But then Roman started erasing you the same way I tried to own you, and I couldn't just stand by and watch it happen again." Vivienne stood, moving closer. "So this is about guilt." "Maybe. Or maybe it's about making sure that if anyone's going to ruin you, it should have been me, not him." The confession was so raw, so honest, that Vivienne didn't know how to respond. She just stood there, staring at the man who'd once suffocated her with love, trying to reconcile him with the man standing in front of her now. "I don't need you to save me," she said finally. "I know, but I'm going to help you save yourself anyway." Before Vivienne could respond, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it off the coffee table, expecting another message from Miranda. It wasn't Miranda. It was a video call from an unknown number. Vivienne's pulse spiked. "Who is this?" "Answer it," Dorian said. "I'll trace the call." Vivienne swiped to accept. The screen flickered, then cleared, and Roman's face filled the frame. But he wasn't calling from the gala. He wasn't in his penthouse. He was somewhere dark, a car maybe, or a parking garage. His face was half-shadowed, but she could see enough. The sharp lines of his jaw, the cold fury in his eyes. "Hello, Vivienne." Her throat went dry. "What do you want?" "I want you to listen very carefully." Roman leaned closer to the camera. "You think you're clever, sending that photo to a journalist, building your little case against me. But you forgot something." "What's that?" "I know where you are." Vivienne's blood turned to ice. She looked at Dorian, who was already pulling up something on his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "You're bluffing," Vivienne said. "Am I?" Roman's smile was sharp. "You're in a loft on the Lower East Side, 14th floor, corner unit with the big windows. You're wearing a white robe. And Dorian Vale is sitting about 10 feet away from you, trying to trace this call." Vivienne's hands started shaking. She glanced at the window, floor-to-ceiling glass completely exposed to the city, to anyone watching from across the street. "How? You think you're the only one with resources?" Roman's voice was calm now, almost conversational. "I've had people following you since you left the gala. I know every move you've made, every breath you've taken, and right now, I know exactly where you're standing." Dorian was on his feet now, crossing to the window. He looked out, scanning the buildings across the street. There, he pointed. Vivienne followed his gaze. Across the street, 5 stories up, a faint red dot blinked in a darkened window. A laser sight. Jesus Christ, Vivienne whispered. Roman's smile widened. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call that journalist back and tell her you made a mistake. That you were emotional, confused, that the photo was taken out of context, and then you're going to disappear, leave New York, leave the country. I don't care, but you're going to stop trying to destroy me. And if I don't? Then the person with the rifle across the street pulls the trigger, and Dorian Vale gets to watch you die the same way you watched our marriage die. Vivienne's pulse hammered so hard she thought she might pass out. She looked at Dorian, who was already moving, grabbing his phone, barking orders to someone on the other end. You're insane, Vivienne said. No, I'm practical. Roman leaned back, his face disappearing into shadow. You have 60 seconds to decide. Call the journalist or die. The screen went black. Vivienne stood frozen, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The red dot was still there, trained on the window, on her. Dorian grabbed her arm. Move. Now. He pulled her away from the window, toward the back of the loft. Vivienne stumbled, her legs barely working, her mind screaming. We need to get out of here, Dorian said. My people are on their way, but if Roman has a sniper... He's bluffing, Vivienne said. He has to be bluffing. You willing to bet your life on that? Before she could answer, the window exploded. Glass shattered inward, a deafening crack splitting the air. Vivienne hit the ground, Dorian covering her, as shards rained down around them. For a moment, everything was silent except for the ringing in her ears. Then Dorian was pulling her up, dragging her toward the door. Go! Go! They ran, out of the loft into the hallway, toward the elevator. Vivienne's bare feet slapped against the cold floor, her heart hammering, her vision tunneling. The elevator doors opened. They threw themselves inside. Dorian hit the button for the parking garage. He's not bluffing, Vivienne gasped. He's trying to kill me. Not you. Dorian's voice was hard. Me. That bullet was aimed at where I was standing. He's sending a message. The elevator descended. Vivienne pressed her back against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to think. We need to get you out of the city, Dorian said. Tonight, right now. I have a place upstate. It's secure. He won't find you there. I'm not running. Vivienne, I said, I'm not running. Her voice cracked. If I run now, he wins. He gets to keep his empire, keep his reputation, keep everything, while I hide for the rest of my life. The elevator doors opened. Dorian's SUV was already waiting, engine running. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, security. Dorian grabbed her arm. Get in the car. No. Vivienne, Papaz. I have proof. She yanked her arm free. I have the photo. I have the documents. I have enough to destroy him. I'm not giving up just because he fired a fucking warning shot. That wasn't a warning. Dorian's eyes were hard. Next time, he won't miss. Vivienne stared at him, her chest heaving, her hands shaking. She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but deep down, she knew he was right. Roman wasn't going to stop, not until she was gone, one way or another. Fine, Vivienne said. We go upstate, but we're taking everything, every document, every photo, every piece of evidence, and we're going to finish this one way or another. Dorian nodded slowly. Get in the car. Vivienne climbed into the SUV. Dorian followed, and the doors slammed shut. The vehicle peeled out of the garage, tires screeching, disappearing into the dark New York streets. And as they drove, Vivienne pulled out her phone and opened her messages. The last text from Roman was still there. You're dead. She stared at it for a long moment, then she typed a reply. Not yet. She hit send and watched the message deliver. 3 dots appeared immediately. Roman was typing, then the dots disappeared, and a new message came through. But it wasn't from Roman. It was from Serafina. We need to talk. Alone. Tomorrow. I'll send you a location. Come alone, or I go straight to Roman with everything I know about you and Dorian. Vivienne's blood went cold. She showed Dorian the message. His jaw tightened. It's a trap. Maybe, or maybe she knows something we don't. Either way, you're not going. Yes, I am. Vivienne, She's his wife, or she thinks she is. If anyone knows where Roman's weak spots are, it's her. Vivienne's hands were steady now, her voice clear. And if she's willing to talk, I need to hear what she has to say. Dorian stared at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if it's a trap, I'm pulling you out before it closes. Vivienne nodded, because deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. And she was running out of time. The safe house upstate was nothing like Dorian's other properties. No glass walls, no city views, just a 2-story cabin buried in the woods 40 miles north of the city, surrounded by trees so thick you couldn't see the road from the windows. The kind of place where people disappeared when they needed to stay disappeared. Vivienne stood in the living room at 4 in the morning, still wearing the white robe, her feet bare and cut from the glass. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the city, hadn't looked at Dorian, just stared out the window at the darkness pressing against the glass. Dorian's security team swept the perimeter. 2 men stationed outside, another 2 inside, all of them armed, stone-faced, speaking in clipped sentences through earpieces. Dorian poured whiskey into 2 glasses and set one on the table beside Vivienne. She didn't touch it. You should get some rest, he said. I can't. Then at least sit down. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Vivienne looked down. Blood had soaked through the gauze on her feet, leaving dark stains on the hardwood floor. She hadn't even felt it. I'll clean it later, she said. Dorian exhaled slowly. He picked up the first aid kit one of his men had brought in and crouched in front of her. Sit. Now. Something in his voice made her obey. Vivienne lowered herself onto the couch, and Dorian unwrapped the gauze from her feet. The cuts had reopened, not deep, but enough to bleed. He cleaned them methodically, his hands surprisingly gentle, wrapping fresh bandages without speaking. When he finished, he sat back on his heels. You need to tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking Roman just tried to kill us. No, he tried to scare us. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Vivienne's laugh was hollow. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you think. Dorian stood, crossing to the window. Roman's not acting like himself. He's reckless, desperate. That sniper was a message, but it was also a mistake. The kind of mistake men make when they're losing control. He's not losing anything. He still has his empire, his reputation, his new wife. For now. Dorian turned to face her. But by tomorrow morning, that journalist runs her story. The marriage license photo goes public, and everyone who watched Roman call you unstable tonight will realize he was lying. That's when his empire starts cracking. Vivienne wanted to believe him, but all she could see was that red laser dot. All she could hear was Roman's voice saying, "You're dead." Serafina's message, Vivienne said. What do you think she wants? I don't know, but I don't trust her. Neither do I. But if she knows something, if she has information we can use, then she would have used it already. Dorian's voice was flat. Women like Serafina don't survive in Roman's world by being stupid. If she's reaching out, it's because she wants something, or because Roman told her to. You think it's a trap? I think it's suicide. Vivienne stood, crossing to where her phone sat on the table. Serafina's message was still there, glowing on the screen. Come alone, or I go straight to Roman with everything I know about you and Dorian. She knows something, Vivienne said quietly. Something she thinks gives her leverage. And if we don't find out what it is, then we deal with it when it becomes a problem. Dorian moved closer. But you're not meeting her. Not without me, not without security, not at all if I can help it. You don't get to make that choice. The hell I don't. You walk into whatever location she sends, and there's a 50% chance Roman's waiting there with a bullet. And a 50% chance she's trying to help. Why would she help you? You humiliated her in front of the entire city. You exposed her relationship with Roman as fraud. She has every reason to want you dead. Vivienne's jaw tightened. Maybe. Or maybe she just realized she's been lied to the same way I was. Dorian stared at her, his pale eyes hard. You're not going. Watch me. Before he could respond, Vivienne's phone buzzed. Another message from Serafina. 10 a.m. Chelsea Piers, Pier 62. Come alone. No exceptions. Vivienne read it twice. Chelsea Piers. Public. Exposed. The kind of place where a sniper would have a dozen angles, where Roman's people could be anywhere. It's a trap, Dorian said. Probably. And you're still going. Vivienne met his eyes. Yes. Dorian's expression didn't change. He just nodded slowly, like he'd known all along this was how it would end. Fine. But we do this my way. You wear a wire. My people are stationed within 100 feet, and at the first sign of trouble, I pull you out. Deal. I mean it, Vivienne. The second something feels wrong, I know. Dorian held her gaze for another moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Tick. Vivienne tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the window exploding, heard the crack of the gunshot, felt Dorian's weight pressing her to the floor. By 8 in the morning, she gave up. She showered, dressed in clothes Dorian's people had brought, dark jeans, black sweater, boots, and pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail. No jewelry, no makeup, just the basics. When she came downstairs, Dorian was waiting. He handed her a small earpiece and a device no bigger than a button. Wire goes under your collar, he said. Earpiece stays in. I'll hear everything. You'll hear me if I need to pull you out. Vivienne attached the wire, fit the earpiece into her ear. Testing. Dorian's voice came through, clear and close. I've got you. They drove back to the city in silence. The SUV moved through sparse morning traffic, the skyline growing larger as they approached. By the time they reached Chelsea, Vivienne's pulse was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Dorian pulled over 3 blocks from the pier. My people are already in position. You walk straight to Pier 62. You talk to Serafina. You get what you need, and then you leave. Understood? Understood. Vivienne. Dorian's hand closed around her wrist. If Roman's there, if you see anyone who isn't Serafina, you run. You don't hesitate. You don't try to be clever. You just run. Vivienne nodded. Dorian released her wrist. Go. Vivienne climbed out of the SUV and started walking. Chelsea Piers stretched along the Hudson River, a mix of sports complexes, restaurants, and open spaces. Pier 62 was one of the outdoor areas, concrete platforms jutting into the water, dotted with benches and small gardens. At 10 in the morning, it was nearly empty. A few joggers, a couple walking a dog. No one who looked like they were waiting for her. Vivienne's pulse hammered as she walked out onto the pier. The wind off the river was cold, cutting through her sweater. She scanned the area looking for Serafina, for Roman, for anyone who might be watching. And then she saw her. Serafina stood at the far end of the pier, leaning against the railing, staring out at the water. She wore a long camel coat, her dark hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked smaller than she had at the gala, more fragile. Vivienne approached slowly, every nerve in her body screaming at her to turn around. Serafina didn't turn, just kept staring at the water. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure I would either. Serafina finally turned to face her. She lifted her sunglasses, and Vivienne saw the bruise first. Dark purple, spreading from her left eye down to her cheekbone, badly concealed under makeup that was already starting to crack. Vivienne's stomach dropped. Did Roman do that? Serafina's smile was bitter. Who else? For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind whipped between them, carrying the smell of salt and exhaust. Why am I here? Vivienne asked. Because I need your help. Serafina's voice was steady, but Vivienne could hear the fear underneath. And because you need mine. I don't need anything from you. Yes, you do. Serafina reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Everything Roman's been hiding, bank accounts, shell corporations, offshore holdings, names of every politician, every judge, every cop he's got in his pocket. It's all here. Vivienne stared at the drive. Why would you give me this? Because he's going to kill me, Serafina's voice cracked. He thinks I'm stupid, that I don't know what he's planning, but I heard him on the phone last night, after the gala, after you exposed him. He was talking to someone, I don't know who, about cleaning up loose ends. And you think you're a loose end? I know I am. Serafina's hand trembled as she held out the drive. He used me to replace you. And now that you've made that public, now that everyone knows, I'm a liability. The second he figures out a way to spin this, I'm gone.
Vivienne took the drive slowly. What do you want in exchange? I want out of New York, out of Roman's reach. I have a passport, cash, but I need time, and I need Roman distracted long enough that he doesn't come after me. And you think I can do that? I think you're the only one who can. Serafina's eyes were desperate now. You've already destroyed his reputation. Now destroy the rest. Use what's on that drive. Expose everything. And while he's busy trying to save himself, I disappear. Vivienne turned the drive over in her hand. It was small, unassuming. But if what Serafina said was true, if this really contained everything, how do I know you're not lying? Vivienne asked. How do I know this isn't just Roman using you to trap me? You don't? Serafina pulled her sunglasses back down. But you're going to use it anyway, because you're just as desperate as I am. Before Vivienne could respond, her earpiece crackled. Dorian's voice came through, sharp and urgent. We've got movement. 3 vehicles, black SUVs, heading toward the pier from the south entrance. Vivienne's blood went cold. She looked past Serafina, scanning the road. And there they were. 3 SUVs moving fast, cutting through traffic. Serafina, Vivienne said, did you tell Roman you were meeting me? Serafina's face went pale. No, I swear. Then he followed you. The SUVs screeched to a stop at the pier entrance. Doors flew open. Men poured out, 6, 7, 8, all wearing dark suits, all moving with purpose. And in the center of them, climbing out of the middle vehicle, was Roman. Shit! Dorian's voice crackled in Vivienne's ear. Move. Now! But Vivienne was already moving. She grabbed Serafina's arm. Run! They ran. Behind them, Roman's voice cut through the morning air. Vivienne, stop! She didn't stop. She ran harder, pulling Serafina with her, their footsteps pounding against the concrete. The pier stretched out behind them, nowhere to go but back toward the entrance, back toward Roman's men. There's a staircase, Serafina gasped. East side. Leads down to the water. They veered right toward the railing. Vivienne saw the stairs, narrow, metal, descending to a lower platform. They hit the stairs at full speed, their shoes clanging against the metal. Behind them, footsteps. Shouting. Roman's men closing the distance. They reached the lower platform, a concrete walkway that ran along the water's edge, mostly empty except for a few storage containers and maintenance equipment. This way, Serafina said. They ran along the walkway, lungs burning, legs screaming. Vivienne could hear Dorian in her ear, giving directions, but the words blurred together. All she could focus on was moving forward, staying ahead of the men behind them. And then the walkway ended. A chain-link fence blocked their path, padlocked shut. Beyond it, the Hudson River stretched out, dark and cold. They were trapped. Vivienne spun around. Roman's men were already descending the stairs, moving methodically, spreading out to cut off any escape. And behind them, moving slower, was Roman. He looked different than he had at the gala. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. The careful mask he always wore had cracked completely, leaving something raw and furious underneath. Vivienne, he said. His voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk. Stay back, Vivienne said. Roman kept walking, his men fanned out behind him, forming a half circle, trapping them against the fence. I gave you a chance, Roman said. I told you to walk away, to disappear. But you couldn't do it. You had to keep pushing, had to keep trying to destroy me. You destroyed yourself. No. Roman's smile was cold. You did. The moment you walked into that gala with Dorian Vale, you declared war, and now you're going to lose. Vivienne's hand tightened around the flash drive in her pocket. You think killing me fixes this? The story's already out. The journalist has everything. By now, half of New York knows you tried to commit bigamy. That story gets buried, Roman said. I've already made calls. The editor's been persuaded. The journalist will retract. And you'll disappear. Tragic accident. Unstable woman throws herself into the river, very sad. Vivienne's pulse hammered. She glanced at the water behind her. 20 feet down, freezing cold. She wouldn't survive 5 minutes. Roman, please. Serafina stepped forward, her voice breaking. You don't have to do this. Just let us go. We won't. Shut up. Roman didn't even look at her.
You've done enough damage. Serafina flinched like she'd been slapped. In Vivienne's ear, Dorian's voice came through, hard and fast. My people are 2 minutes out. Stall him. 2 minutes. Vivienne just needed to keep Roman talking for 2 minutes. You want to know why I left? Vivienne said. Her voice was steady now, clear. Why I chose Dorian over you. Roman's jaw tightened. I don't care. You should, because the answer's the same reason you're about to lose everything. And what's that? You never loved me. Vivienne took a step forward. You loved owning me. You loved the idea of taking something from Dorian Vale, but you never actually saw me. Not once. I was just a trophy, a prize, something to prove you were powerful enough to take whatever you wanted. Roman's expression darkened. That's not... It is. Vivienne's voice was louder now, cutting through his denial. And Serafina? She was the same thing, younger, prettier, more willing to play the game. But the second she stopped being useful, the second she became a liability, you decided to throw her away too. I didn't Yes, you did. Vivienne's voice cracked. You threw me away first. You spent a year planning how to erase me like I never existed. And you would have gotten away with it if I hadn't fought back. If I hadn't reminded you that I'm not some fucking object you can just discard. Roman's hands curled into fists. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Vivienne pulled the flash drive from her pocket and held it up. Serafina gave me this. Everything you've been hiding. Every crime, every bribe, every dirty deal. And if you kill me, if you kill her, this goes public. All of it. Roman went very still. Give me the drive. No. Give me the goddamn drive, Vivienne. Come and take it. For a moment, everything was silent except for the wind and the water lapping against the concrete. Then Roman moved. He lunged forward, faster than Vivienne expected. She stumbled backward, but his hand closed around her wrist, yanking her toward him. The flash drive flew from her hand, skittering across the concrete. Vivienne swung at him, her fist connecting with his jaw. Roman's head snapped to the side, but he didn't let go. His other hand grabbed her throat, squeezing. You stupid, he snarled. You think you can... Vivienne drove her knee into his stomach. Roman doubled over, gasping, and she twisted free. She dove for the flash drive, her fingers closing around it just as one of Roman's men grabbed her from behind, strong arms locked around her chest, lifting her off the ground. Vivienne kicked, thrashed, but the man didn't let go. Enough! Roman straightened, blood trickling from his split lip. Hold her! The man tightened his grip. Vivienne couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Roman walked toward her slowly, his eyes cold. I tried to do this the easy way, but you wouldn't let me, so now... A gunshot cracked through the air. Roman's head snapped around. One of his men collapsed, blood spreading across his chest. And then Dorian was there. He came from the north entrance, flanked by 4 of his own men, all of them armed. They moved like a military unit, precise and lethal, guns raised. Let her go, Dorian said. His voice was flat, absolute. Roman's men hesitated, looking at each other, at Roman, at the guns pointed at their heads. Now, Dorian said. The man holding Vivienne released her. She stumbled forward, gasping, and Dorian's hand closed around her arm, pulling her behind him. Roman stared at Dorian, his face twisted with rage. You think this is over? No. Dorian raised his gun, aiming it directly at Roman's head. But it's about to be. For a long moment, no one moved. 2 groups of armed men facing each other across 20 feet of concrete. The only sound was the wind and Vivienne's ragged breathing. Then Roman laughed. It was a horrible sound, broken, unhinged. You're going to shoot me, he said, in broad daylight? With witnesses? If I have to. And then what? You think you'll get away with it? You think you can just walk out of here after murdering me? I think no one will care. Dorian's voice was cold. You're a criminal, a liar, a man who beats women and calls it power. The world will be better off without you. Roman's smile faltered. He looked at his men, then at Dorian's doing the math. He was outnumbered, outgunned, losing. This isn't over, Roman said. Yes, Vivienne said, stepping forward. It is. She held up the flash drive. I have everything, every crime, every name, and in about 30 seconds, I'm handing this to the FBI agent waiting 3 blocks from here. So you can shoot me. You can shoot Dorian. You can shoot all of us. But the second you do, every law enforcement agency in the country will be hunting you." Roman's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Vivienne's smile was sharp. "You want to find out?" Roman stared at her, his chest heaving, his jaw working. Then he looked at Dorian. "This isn't over," he repeated. "Actually," a new voice said, "it is." Everyone turned. A woman stepped onto the lower platform. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing a dark suit and an FBI badge clipped to her belt. Special Agent Miranda Chen. The journalist Vivienne had contacted, except she wasn't a journalist. Vivienne's stomach dropped. "What? Vivienne Cross," Agent Chen said, her voice calm and professional. "Thank you for your cooperation. And Roman Moretti, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and about 15 other charges we'll discuss downtown." Roman went rigid. "You don't have, we have everything." Chen pulled out a set of handcuffs. "The flash drive your girlfriend just offered Ms. Cross? We've had access to those files for 3 months. We've been building a case. We just needed you to confirm it was all real. And threatening 2 women in public with 8 witnesses? That'll do nicely." Roman's face went from pale to gray. He looked at Vivienne, at Dorian, at the FBI agents now flooding onto the platform from both entrances. He'd lost, completely. "Hands behind your back," Chen said. Roman didn't move. For a moment, Vivienne thought he might run, might fight, might pull a gun and go down in a blaze of violence. But he didn't. He just stood there as the cuffs clicked around his wrists, his empire crumbling around him, his carefully constructed life collapsing in real time. Chen led him away. His men followed, also in cuffs, also silent. And then it was over. Vivienne stood on the concrete platform, the flash drive still clutched in her hand, her whole body trembling. Serafina had collapsed against the railing, crying quietly. Dorian holstered his gun and turned to Vivienne. "You okay?" She wanted to say yes. Wanted to say she was fine, but the truth was, she wasn't fine. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her throat hurt where Roman had grabbed her. And the reality of what had just happened, what she'd just survived, was crashing over her in waves. Her voice broke. "I need—" Dorian pulled her against his chest. Vivienne collapsed into him, her hands fisting in his jacket, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's over," Dorian murmured. "He's done. You won." But Vivienne didn't feel like she'd won. She felt like she'd just barely survived. They kept her at the FBI field office for 6 hours. Questions, statements, lawyers. Vivienne answered everything mechanically, her voice flat, her mind somewhere far away. The flash drive was real. Everything Serafina had said was true. Roman's entire operation, his empire, his network, his carefully constructed lies. It was all there. Bank records showing money laundering, property deeds under false names, recorded conversations between Roman and corrupt officials, enough to put him away for decades. By the time they let Vivienne go, it was after dark. Dorian was waiting in the lobby, leaning against the wall, his expression unreadable. "They're charging him with everything," Vivienne said. "Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. He's not getting out." Dorian nodded. "Good. Serafina's cooperating. Witness protection, new identity. She'll disappear." "Also good." Vivienne stood there staring at him, trying to find words for what she was feeling. But there were no words, just exhaustion, just the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting for so long she'd forgotten what peace felt like. "What happens now?" she asked. Dorian pushed off the wall. "Now? You decide what kind of life you want." "What does that mean?" "It means you're free." He moved closer. "No Roman, no empire. No one controlling you. You can go anywhere, do anything, be anyone." Vivienne's throat tightened. "And you?" "I go back to my life, you go back to yours. And maybe, if you want, we figure out what that looks like." "Together?" Dorian's expression softened. "If you want." Vivienne stared at him, at the man who'd loved her so fiercely it had nearly destroyed her, who'd helped her destroy Roman even though it meant risking everything.
who'd stood beside her when everyone else had walked away. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "That's okay." Dorian reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You have time to figure it out." Vivienne closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, in years, she let herself breathe. And when she opened them again, Dorian was still there, waiting. 3 days later, Vivienne stood in the penthouse, Roman's penthouse, packing the last of her things. The FBI had cleared the property. Roman's assets were frozen, his account seized, his empire dismantled piece by piece. She didn't take much: clothes, a few books, some jewelry that had belonged to her mother. The rest she left behind. All the expensive things Roman had bought her. All the trappings of a life that had never really been hers. When she was done, she walked through the empty rooms one last time. The marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the cold, pristine space that had been her prison for 7 years. And she felt nothing. Dorian was waiting downstairs. The SUV idled at the curb, engine running. "Ready?" he asked. Vivienne looked back at the building one last time. Then she turned to Dorian. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They drove out of the city as the sun set, the skyline shrinking behind them. Vivienne didn't know where they were going, didn't know what came next, but for the first time in her life she realized she didn't need to know. She was free. And freedom, real freedom, meant learning to be okay with the unknown. Dorian's hand found hers in the dark. Vivienne squeezed back. And as the city disappeared behind them, she finally let herself believe it. She'd survived. She'd won. And the woman Roman Moretti had tried to erase? She was never going to disappear again. 3 months. That's how long it took for Roman Moretti's empire to completely disintegrate. Vivienne watched it happen from a distance, reading the headlines on her phone while sitting in a coffee shop in a town whose name she barely remembered. The indictments came first: 17 counts of fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, attempted murder. Then the trials. Roman's associates flipped one by one, cutting deals to save themselves, burying him deeper with every testimony. His lawyers argued, his remaining allies protested, but the evidence was overwhelming. The flash drive Serafina had handed her contained everything, and the FBI had used every bite. Roman was sentenced to 42 years in federal prison. No parole, no appeal that would stick. He'd be 78 when he got out, if he lived that long. Men like Roman didn't survive prison well. Too many enemies. Too many people waiting for revenge. Vivienne read the sentencing article twice, then closed her phone and stared out the window at the gray autumn sky. She should have felt something. Relief. Satisfaction. The vindication of watching the man who'd tried to erase her finally pay for what he'd done. But all she felt was tired. Dorian sat across from her, nursing a black coffee, watching her with those pale eyes that never seemed to miss anything. "You okay?" he asked. Vivienne set her phone down. "I don't know." "That's honest. It's the only thing I know how to be anymore." They'd been living like this for 3 months, moving from city to city, never staying anywhere longer than a few weeks. Dorian said it was for safety. Roman still had associates on the outside, people who might want revenge. But Vivienne suspected it was more than that. She suspected Dorian didn't know how to stop running any more than she did. "We should talk about what happens next," Dorian said. "I know. We can't keep doing this forever." "I know that too." Dorian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What do you want, Vivienne?" The question hung between them like smoke. What did she want? A month ago she would have said freedom, safety, distance from everything that had happened. But now? Now she wasn't sure anymore. "I want to stop feeling like I'm still running," Vivienne said finally. "I want to wake up in the morning and not check over my shoulder. I want to live somewhere longer than 3 weeks. I want—" She stopped, her throat tight. "I want to figure out who I am when I'm not surviving someone else." Dorian nodded slowly. "Then we stop running." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward her. "I have a property in the Catskills. Quiet, isolated, but not a safe house, an actual home. We can go there, stay as long as you need, figure things out." Vivienne looked at the photo on his screen, a 2-story house surrounded by trees, mountains visible in the distance.
It looked peaceful, permanent, the kind of place where people built lives instead of hiding from them. And then what? Vivienne asked. Then you decide. Dorian's voice was quiet. If you want to stay, if you want to go, if you want me in your life, or if you'd rather I disappear. But whatever you choose, I won't fight you. Not this time. Vivienne stared at him. For 3 months, they'd existed in this strange limbo. Not quite together, not quite apart. Dorian had kept his distance, given her space, never pushed, but she could feel it. The weight of everything unsaid between them, the history, the love that had once consumed them both. I'm not the same person I was when we were married, Vivienne said. Neither am I. I don't know if I can love you the way I did before. I'm not asking you to. Dorian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. I'm just asking you to give me a chance to prove I can be someone worth staying for. Vivienne looked at his hand, at the man who'd helped her destroy Roman, even though it had cost him almost as much as it had cost her, who'd stood beside her when everyone else had walked away, who'd given her the space to breathe when she'd needed it most. She placed her hand over his. Okay, she said. Let's go to the Catskills. Yes. The house was exactly as it had looked in the photo. Wood and stone, surrounded by trees turning gold and red with autumn. A wraparound porch, large windows that let in natural light. Inside it was simple but comfortable. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, furniture that looked lived in instead of expensive. It felt like a home. Vivienne stood in the living room the first night, staring at the fireplace, trying to remember the last time she'd felt this kind of peace. Dorian was in the kitchen, making dinner, something he'd never done when they were married. Back then, he'd had people for that, staff, servants, a whole infrastructure designed to keep him from having to do anything ordinary. But now he moved through the kitchen like he'd been doing it for years, chopping vegetables, stirring a pot on the stove, occasionally glancing at a recipe on his phone. You cook now? Vivienne asked. I learned. Dorian didn't look up from the cutting board. Turns out when you spend 7 years pretending to be someone you're not, you pick up a few useful skills. Pretending. You're not the only one who tried to disappear, Vivienne. He set the knife down and turned to face her. After you left, I realized I didn't know who I was without you. The Ghost King. The man everyone feared. That was just a mask. And underneath it, I was nothing. Vivienne moved closer. So what did you do? I tried to build something real. Dorian's voice was quiet. Started legitimate businesses. Cut ties with the worst of my operations. Tried to become the kind of man you might have stayed for. But by the time I found you again, you were with Roman, and I realized I was too late. You weren't too late. Wasn't I? Dorian's smile was bitter. You chose him over me. I chose safety over you, Vivienne corrected. There's a difference. Roman felt like the opposite of you. Controlled. Distant. I thought that meant he was safer. I was wrong. We were both wrong. Dorian turned back to the stove. I thought loving you harder would keep you. He thought owning you would. Neither of us understood that you can't keep someone who doesn't want to be kept. Vivienne leaned against the counter, watching him work. And now? Now I just want you to be happy. Even if that means you leave. The words settled between them, honest and raw. Vivienne wanted to say something, to reassure him, but she didn't know what promises she could make. Not yet. Not when she was still figuring out how to be a person again, instead of a survivor. They ate dinner on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was cool, sharp with the smell of wood smoke and pine. They didn't talk much, just sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from two people who'd seen each other at their worst and hadn't run. That night, Vivienne lay in bed in a room on the second floor, her own room, with her own space, because Dorian had given her that without asking, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, she didn't check the locks on the doors, didn't listen for footsteps in the hallway, didn't reach for her phone to make sure Roman wasn't calling. She just breathed, and slowly, finally, she started to let go. The days fell into a rhythm. Vivienne spent her mornings walking through the woods, relearning what it felt like to move without fear. Dorian worked from home, managing his businesses remotely, making calls, handling problems she didn't ask about. In the afternoons, they coexisted, sometimes talking, sometimes not. Just being. 3 weeks in, Vivienne found herself in the kitchen, staring at a sketchpad she'd bought in town. She hadn't drawn in years, not since before Roman, before Dorian, before everything. But her hands remembered. She started with simple things. Trees, the view from the porch, the curve of the mountains. Dorian found her one afternoon, surrounded by discarded sketches, charcoal smudged on her hands. "You're an artist," he said. It wasn't a question.
I used to be. Vivienne set the charcoal down. Before. Before me. Before everything. She looked at her hands, at the black stains on her fingers. I had a scholarship to art school when I was 18, but then I met you and I consumed your whole life, Dorian finished. I know. I'm sorry. Vivienne didn't respond, because what was there to say? He was right, and she'd let him. She'd let herself be consumed because it had felt easier than fighting, easier than being alone. What would you draw? Dorian asked. If you could draw anything. Vivienne looked out the window at the mountains. I don't know. Maybe just this moment, this place where nothing's burning down. Then draw it. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I don't know if I remember how to create something without it being taken away. Dorian crouched beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. Then learn again. I'll wait. And he did. Yes. 6 weeks into their stay, Vivienne received a letter. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, forwarded through Dorian's lawyer. She opened it carefully, her hand steady but her pulse racing. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Serafina's handwriting. Vivienne, I'm somewhere safe now. New name, new life. The FBI kept their promise. I wanted to thank you for listening, for taking the risk, for giving me a chance when you had every reason not to. I know what Roman did to you, what he did to both of us. And I know that saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry anyway. Sorry I didn't see it sooner. Sorry I was part of your pain. I hope you're healing. I hope you've found peace. You deserved better than what either of us got. Thank you for saving my life. S. Vivienne read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and set it on the table. Dorian was watching from the doorway. She okay? He asked. She's alive. That's more than I expected. You did that. You saved her. We both did. Dorian moved into the room, sitting across from her. Do you regret it? Any of it? Vivienne thought about that, about the gala, about the confrontation on the pier, about watching Roman get dragged away in handcuffs, about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. No, she said finally. I regret trusting Roman. I regret not fighting back sooner, but I don't regret destroying him, and I don't regret asking you for help, even though it meant coming back to me. Even though, Dorian's expression softened. I don't deserve that. Maybe not. Vivienne stood, moving to the window. But I'm not here because you deserve it. I'm here because I chose it. And for the first time in my life, that choice is mine. Not yours, not Roman's, mine. She turned to face him, and the weight of everything she'd survived was written across her face. The scars, the exhaustion, the hard-won strength. I'm not the woman you married, Vivienne said, and I'm not the woman Roman tried to break. I'm something else now, something I'm still figuring out. And if you can live with that, if you can be okay with me not having all the answers, then maybe we can try this. But if you can't, I can, Dorian interrupted. He stood, crossing the room until he was inches away. I can live with that. I can live with not knowing. I can live with you figuring it out. All I need is the chance to stand beside you while you do. Vivienne searched his face, looking for the man who'd once loved her so fiercely it had felt like drowning. But he wasn't there anymore. In his place was someone quieter, more careful, someone who'd learned the same lessons she had, that love without space was suffocation and control was just another word for fear. Okay, she said. Then stay. Dorian exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for months. Okay. Winter came to the Catskills slowly. The trees lost their leaves, snow dusted the mountains.
The nights grew longer, colder, but inside the house warmth held. Vivienne started painting again. Real paintings this time, not just sketches. She set up a studio in one of the empty rooms, filled it with canvases and oils and brushes. Dorian bought her supplies without asking, left them on the table like offerings. The first painting she finished was of the view from the porch, mountains and trees and sky. Nothing dramatic, nothing symbolic, just the world as it was, beautiful and indifferent and still. Dorian found her standing in front of it one evening, arms crossed, studying her work. "It's good," he said. "It's honest," Vivienne corrected. "Same thing." She smiled. "Maybe." They stood there together looking at the painting, and Vivienne realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about the past. Wasn't replaying the gala or the confrontation or Roman's face when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. She was just here, present, alive. "I think I'm ready," she said. Dorian glanced at her. "Ready for what?" "To stop hiding, to start living." She turned to face him. "I want to open a gallery, something small, in town. Show my work. Maybe other artists' work too. Build something that's mine." "Then we'll do it." "Not we, me." Vivienne's voice was firm but not unkind. "I need to do this on my own. Build something that doesn't belong to anyone else, that no one can take away." Dorian nodded slowly. "I understand. But I want you there," Vivienne added, "not as a partner, not as someone who owns it, just as someone who stands beside me while I build it." "I can do that." "You're sure?" "Vivienne." Dorian stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "I've spent the last 7 years trying to become the kind of man who could stand beside you instead of in front of you. If you're giving me that chance, I'm not going to waste it." Vivienne squeezed his hand. "Then let's stop wasting time." Outshan. The gallery opened in spring, a small space on Main Street in a town that barely had a downtown. But it was hers. Every wall, every painting, every decision. She called it Ashes, because that's what she'd risen from. The opening night was quiet. Locals mostly, curious about the new gallery, about the woman who'd moved to town with the dangerous-looking man who never smiled. Vivienne wore a simple black dress, her hair longer now, falling past her shoulders. She looked different than she had at the gala. Softer, but no less strong. Dorian stood in the corner, hands in his pockets, watching her talk to visitors. He didn't approach, didn't hover, just watched. And when their eyes met across the room, he smiled. It was a real smile, not the cold, calculated expression she remembered from years ago, not the mask he wore when he was the Ghost King, just him, human, imperfect, trying. An older woman approached Vivienne, studying the painting on the wall, the view from the porch, the one she'd finished first. "This is beautiful," the woman said. "What inspired it?" Vivienne looked at the painting, at the mountains and sky and the world she'd painted exactly as it was. "Survival," she said simply. The woman nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe everyone understood that particular kind of beauty, the kind that came from living through something that should have destroyed you. By the time the gallery closed, Vivienne's feet hurt and her voice was hoarse, but she felt lighter than she had in years. She locked the door, turned off the lights, and stepped outside into the cool spring air. Dorian was waiting by the car. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I sold 3 paintings." "That's good." "It's more than good. It's a start." Vivienne leaned against the car beside him, looking up at the stars. "Thank you." "For what?" "For helping me get here, for not trying to control it, for being different than you were." Dorian was quiet for a moment. "I'm not doing it for you." Vivienne glanced at him. "No?" "No. I'm doing it for me." He turned to face her. "Because the man I was when we were married, that man was a coward. He thought power meant control, that love meant ownership, and he lost the only person who ever mattered because of it. And now? Now I know better." Dorian's voice was steady. "Love isn't holding someone so tight they can't breathe. It's giving them space to become who they're meant to be, even if that means they outgrow you." Vivienne's throat tightened. "I haven't outgrown you." "Not yet, but you might."
Dorian smiled. And if you do, I'll let you go. Because that's what you deserve. Freedom, not another cage.
Vivienne reached for his hand, their fingers laced together, familiar but different. Everything between them was different now. Quieter, more honest, built on choice instead of obsession. I'm not going anywhere, Vivienne said. You might change your mind. I might. But right now, in this moment, I'm choosing to stay. And I'm choosing you. She squeezed his hand. Not because I need you, not because I'm afraid to be alone, but because I want to see what we can build when we're both whole people instead of broken ones trying to fix each other. Dorian's eyes gleamed in the starlight. That sounds like a good reason. It's the only reason I've got. They stood there for a while longer, hands linked, looking up at the sky. Somewhere far away, in a federal prison, Roman Moretti was probably staring at concrete walls, his empire destroyed, his name ruined. Vivienne hoped he was thinking about her, hoped he understood, finally, that erasing someone didn't make them disappear. It just made them dangerous. But mostly, she hoped she'd never have to think about him again. Let's go home, Vivienne said. Dorian opened the car door for her. Yeah, let's go home. 1 year after the gala, Vivienne stood on the porch of the house in the Catskills, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was warm, thick with the smell of summer grass and pine. Inside, Dorian was making dinner again, something he'd gotten genuinely good at over the months. Vivienne's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting a message from the gallery, or maybe one of the artists she'd started working with. But it was from a number she didn't recognize. Vivienne Cross? She hesitated, then typed back. Who is this? The reply came fast. Agent Miranda Chen, FBI. I wanted to let you know, Roman Moretti was attacked in prison this morning. He's alive, but barely. Thought you should hear it from me instead of the news. Vivienne stared at the message, her pulse steady. She should have felt something. Fear that he might somehow come after her again. Satisfaction that he'd finally faced real consequences. Something. But all she felt was distant. Like Roman Moretti was a character from someone else's story. Someone she'd read about once but never actually met. She deleted the message and put the phone away. Dorian stepped onto the porch, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He handed her one and stood beside her, looking out at the mountains. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, Vivienne said. Everything's fine. And she meant it, because Roman was in prison. Serafina was safe. The empire that had tried to bury Vivienne had crumbled into dust. And she was here, in a place she'd chosen, with a man she'd chosen, building a life that belonged to no one but herself. I was thinking, Dorian said slowly, about the future. Yeah? What if we made this permanent? He gestured at the house, the mountains, everything. Not just a place to hide, but a real home. A place we build together. Vivienne looked at him, at the man who'd once suffocated her with love and had learned, painfully, how to let her breathe. Who'd helped her destroy her demons even though it meant facing his own. Who'd given her space when she needed it and stayed when she'd asked him to. I think I'd like that, Vivienne said. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled. But I have one condition. What's that? No secrets, no lies, no games. If we do this, we do it honestly. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Dorian held out his hand. Deal. Vivienne shook it, then pulled him closer and kissed him. It was different than the kisses they'd shared when they were younger. Less desperate, less consuming, but deeper, more real. When they pulled apart, Dorian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I know what that actually means now. Vivienne's eyes burned. I love you too, but if you ever try to control me again, if you ever make me feel like I can't breathe, I'll leave and I won't come back. I know. Good. They stood there on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. And for the first time in her life, Vivienne felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone had chosen her, not because she was running from something, but because she'd fought her way to this moment, through fire and blood and betrayal, and had come out the other side still standing, still whole, still herself. So,
3 years later, Vivienne stood in front of a canvas in her studio, brush in hand, creating something new. The gallery had grown, she'd expanded, started representing other artists, built a reputation. Her own paintings hung in galleries across the state now, some even in New York City. People knew her name, not as Roman Moretti's disappeared wife, not as Dorian Vale's ex, but as Vivienne Cross, artist, survivor, woman who'd burned down an empire and built something beautiful from the ashes.
Dorian walked into the studio carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one on the table beside her and kissed the top of her head. "How's it coming?" he asked. Vivienne stepped back, studying the canvas. It was different from her earlier work, bolder, more abstract, layers of color bleeding into each other, forming something that felt like chaos and peace at the same time. "I think it's done," she said. "What are you calling it?" Vivienne smiled. "Phoenix." Dorian nodded slowly. "Fitting." They stood there together, looking at the painting, at the life they'd built, at the future stretching out before them, uncertain, imperfect, but theirs. And Vivienne realized something. She'd spent years being afraid of Dorian, afraid of Roman, afraid of herself, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She was free. And freedom, real, hard-won freedom, was the most beautiful thing she'd ever created. "Come on," Dorian said, taking her hand. "Dinner's almost ready." Vivienne set down her brush, wiped her hands on a rag, and followed him out of the studio. They walked through the house they'd made their home, past the windows overlooking the mountains, into the kitchen where something smelled like garlic and wine and comfort. Outside, the world kept turning. Somewhere, people were fighting battles similar to the ones she'd fought. Somewhere, empires were rising and falling. Somewhere, someone was learning the same lesson she had, that surviving wasn't the same as living, and sometimes you had to burn everything down to find out who you really were. But here, in this house, in this moment, Vivienne was just living. No empire to destroy, no enemies to fight, no identity to reclaim, just her life, her choices, her future. And as she sat down at the table across from Dorian, raising a glass to celebrate another ordinary, perfect evening, Vivienne thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. The woman standing in a penthouse, watching her husband erase her on live television. The woman who'd sent a desperate text to the one man she'd sworn never to contact again. That woman had been terrified. That woman had felt powerless. That woman had believed she was nothing without someone else defining her. But that woman was gone now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that the only person who could erase Vivienne Cross was Vivienne herself. And she'd decided, once and for all, that erasure wasn't an option. Not anymore, not ever again. Dorian raised his glass. "To us." Vivienne clinked her glass against his. "To us, and to never forgetting what it cost to get here." "Never," Dorian agreed. They drank, and outside the sun set behind the mountains one more time, painting the world in gold and shadow, while inside 2 people who'd survived the worst of each other finally learned how to love the best. The story of Vivienne Cross, the woman who'd been a trophy, a prisoner, a ghost, was over. But the story of Vivienne Cross, the woman who'd fought back, who'd reclaimed herself, who'd built a life worth living, was just beginning. And this time, nobody could take it away.